Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance and watched the stars flicker on his main screen. Each flicker meant another world was dying. Another civilization was falling to the Vorthok Empire. He had been watching those lights go out for 3 weeks now. The Vorthok were unlike anything humanity had ever faced. Their ships were massive, dark gray monsters that moved through space like hungry sharks. Each one was the size of a small moon. Their weapons could crack planets in half. Their shields stopped every attack that hit them. In 6 months, they had destroyed 17 galaxies. Billions of beings were dead. Ancient civilizations that had lasted millions of years were gone in days. The greatest military fleets in known space had thrown everything they had at the Vorthok. Nothing worked. Nothing even slowed them down. Jake looked around his small bridge. The USS Defiance was an exploration ship, not a warship. She carried 43 people whose job was to map new star systems and make peaceful contact with alien species. They had plasma cannons for protection against pirates, but nothing that could fight a real war. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez sat at the communications station. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail, and her hands moved quickly over the control panels. She had been trying to reach other human ships for hours. Most of them were not answering anymore. Chief Engineer Paul Wright was at the engineering station. He was 52 years old and had been fixing starships since before Jake was born. His gray hair was messy, and his uniform had grease stains on it. Paul could make any ship run better than it was supposed to, but even he could not turn an exploration vessel into a battleship. Navigator Lisa Hayes worked at her station with quiet focus. She was 28 and had joined the crew just 6 months ago. Her job was to plot courses through space and keep them away from dangerous areas. Right now, the entire galaxy seemed dangerous. Weapons Officer Tony Clark checked and rechecked his instruments. He was a former Marine who had joined the Exploration Service for a quieter life. His weapon systems were designed to handle small threats, not an empire that crushed galaxies. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's systems. Everyone knew what was happening out there. Everyone knew they were probably going to die soon. Amy's voice broke the silence. "Captain, I'm getting a transmission from the Centauri Defense Fleet." Jake felt his stomach tighten. The Centauri fleet was one of humanity's strongest military forces. If they were calling, it was not good news. "Put it through," Jake said. Admiral Chen's voice came through the speakers. Jake had met Chen once at a military ceremony. He was a tough old soldier who had fought pirates and raiders for 30 years. Now his voice sounded tired and scared. "All human vessels, this is Admiral Chen of the Centauri Defense Fleet. We are under attack by Vorthok forces. We cannot stop them. Repeat, we cannot stop them." Jake heard explosions in the background of the transmission. Someone was screaming orders. Chun's voice continued. "Their shields adapt to everything we throw at them. Our most powerful weapons do no damage. They regenerate faster than we can hurt them. We have lost 60% of our fleet in the last hour." More explosions. The transmission was getting weaker. "If anyone receives this message, run. Do not try to fight them. Do not try to be heroes. Just run as far and as fast as you can. Earth Command, if you can hear this, evacuate the colonies. Get everyone out of the core systems. They are coming, and we cannot." The transmission cut to static. The bridge fell completely silent. Jake looked at his crew and saw his own fear reflected in their faces. Admiral Chen had 1,200 ships under his command. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, fighters, the best weapons and shields that human technology could build. They had lasted 1 hour. "Amy," Jake said quietly, "any word from other fleets?" Amy shook her head. "Nothing from the Europa Squadron. Nothing from the Mars Defense Force. The Colonial Guard stopped transmitting 2 hours ago." Lisa looked up from her navigation station. "Captain, long-range sensors are picking up massive objects moving toward our position. Based on their size and speed, they match Vorthok's ship profiles." "How many?" Jake asked. "At least 30, sir. Maybe more. They're still at the edge of sensor range." "How long until they reach us?" Lisa ran the calculations. 6 hours at their current speed. Jake felt the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. 43 people trusted him to keep them alive. 43 people who had families back on Earth, who had dreams and hopes and futures that might end in 6 hours. Paul Wright spoke up from the engineering station. Captain, our engines are running at full efficiency. We can make maximum warp for about 12 hours before we need to stop for maintenance. Plot a course for the Outer Rim territories, Jake ordered. We'll regroup with whatever human forces are left and wait. Paul interrupted. I'm reading gravitational distortions ahead of us. Multiple massive objects dropping out of warp. The main screen changed to show the tactical display. Red dots appeared in front of them, behind them, and on both sides. The Vorthok were not just chasing them. They were surrounding the entire star system. How is that possible? Amy asked. They were 6 hours away just a minute ago. They split their fleet, Lisa realized. Some ships came straight at us, while others jumped ahead to cut off our escape routes. Jake stared at the tactical display. Dozens of red contacts were moving to block every possible path out of the system. The Vortok had learned from their previous battles. They were not going to let any ships escape this time. How long until the trap closes? Jake asked. Lisa's fingers moved over her controls. At their current speed, all escape routes will be blocked in for hours. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. The Vortok were not just trying to destroy them. They were making sure no one could run away and warn others. This was not a battle. This was an execution. He thought about the families back on Earth. His own sister lived on Lunar Colony with her 2 children. His parents had retired to the agricultural world of New Kansas. If the USS Defiance died here, would anyone even know to warn them? Tony Clark looked up from his weapons station. Captain, should I begin charging our weapon systems? Jake almost laughed. Their plasma cannons were designed to stop pirates flying single-person fighters. The Vorthok ships were the size of cities. It would be like trying to stop a hurricane with a water gun. But what else could they do? Amy, send a message to Earth Command, Jake ordered. Tell them about the Vorthok fleet positions. Include everything we know about their tactics and weapons. Maybe someone can use the information. Yes, sir, Amy replied. Her hands moved over the communications panel. Message sent. It will take 3 days to reach Earth. 3 days, Jake wondered if Earth would even exist in 3 days. He looked around the bridge again. These people had signed up for peaceful exploration. They wanted to discover new worlds, meet friendly aliens, and expand human knowledge. They had not volunteered to be humanity's last stand against an unstoppable enemy. But here they were, 43 humans in a small ship, surrounded by an empire that had crushed galaxies. In 4 hours, the trap would close. In 6 hours, the Vortok would arrive to finish them off. Jake Morrison had a choice to make. He could order everyone to the escape pods and hope the Vortok would not bother hunting down individual lifeboats. Or he could stay and fight with weapons that could not hurt the enemy. Neither choice seemed likely to save his crew. But one choice would let them die as humans, fighting back even when there was no hope. Refusing to go quietly into the dark dot, Jake activated the ship-wide communication system. It was time to find out what kind of people he commanded. Jake Morrison's voice echoed through every corridor and room of the USS Defiance. In the engine room, mechanics stopped their work and listened. In the medical bay, doctors paused while checking supplies. In crew quarters, people sat on their bunks and waited to hear what their captain would say. Everyone listen carefully, Jake began. I will not lie to you about our situation. We are trapped. The Vorthok Empire has surrounded this entire star system. In a few hours, their main fleet will arrive to destroy us. He paused, looking around the bridge at his officers. Amy Rodriguez had stopped working at her communications station and was listening intently. Paul Wright stood in the doorway that led to engineering, his arms crossed. Lisa Hayes and Tony Clark had turned in their chairs to face him. You all know what has happened to every other human fleet that faced the Vorthok, Jake continued. They were destroyed completely. The enemy's shields stop all of our weapons. Their holes are too thick for our guns to penetrate. By every measure of military science, we cannot win this fight. Down in the crew quarters, Petty Officer Don Murphy sat on his bunk and listened to the captain's words. Don was 2 years old and had joined the crew 8 months ago. His job was to maintain the ship's sensors and communication arrays. He had never been in a real battle before. In the next room, Dr. Kate Lewis finished packing medical supplies into portable kits. She was the ship's chief medical officer and had served on exploration vessels for 6 years. Kate had treated injuries from accidents and illnesses, but never combat wounds. She hoped she would not have to learn today. I am giving everyone a choice, Jake's voice continued. We have escape pods that can hold our entire crew. The nearby nebula might hide you from Vorthok sensors long enough for rescue ships to find you. Anyone who wants to evacuate has my complete permission and understanding. In the engine room, Mechanic First Class Bobby Turner looked at his fellow engineers. Bobby was 31 and had 2 children back on Earth. His wife Sarah worked as a teacher on Lunar Colony. He thought about them as he listened to the captain. But if you choose to stay, Jake said, we are going to find out what 43 determined humans can do against impossible odds. We are going to show these aliens that humans do not surrender without a fight. The ship fell silent. For long moments, nobody moved. Then footsteps echoed in the corridors as crew members began walking toward their battle stations. Don Murphy stood up from his bunk and headed for the sensor control room. Dr. Kate Lewis shouldered her medical kit and walked toward the bridge. Bobby Turner picked up his tools and went back to work on the engine modifications that Paul Wright had requested. Not a single person went to the escape pods. Jake felt a mixture of pride and sadness as he watched his crew prepare for battle. These people trusted him enough to die with him. He only hoped he could make their sacrifice mean something. Amy, what is the status of our communication with other ships? Jake asked. Still nothing from any major fleet units. Sir, Amy replied, but I am picking up some weak signals from individual ships. It sounds like there are survivors scattered throughout this region of space. Can you reach them? I can try, but the Vorthok are jamming most frequencies. Any message I send will also tell the enemy exactly where we are. Jake thought about this. If other human ships were hiding in the area, they might be able to coordinate some kind of attack. Even small exploration and transport vessels might be able to do damage if they worked together. Send the message, Jake decided. Tell any human ships in this system to converge on our position. We are going to make a stand. Paul Wright came onto the bridge from engineering. His uniform was even more dirty than before, and he looked tired, but his eyes were sharp and focused. Captain, I have been thinking about our weapons situation, Paul said. Our plasma cannons and photon torpedoes cannot hurt Vorthok shields, but we do have some equipment that they have never seen before. What kind of equipment? The quantum resonance scanner. It was designed to study subspace anomalies and analyze the structure of space-time itself. It generates a very focused quantum field that can penetrate almost any kind of matter. Tony Clark looked up from his weapons station. You want to use a scientific instrument as a weapon? It might work, Paul said. The quantum field disrupts the basic structure of matter at the subatomic level. If I can modify the scanner too, focus its beam on a Vorthok ship, it might destabilize their shield generators. Jake felt the first spark of hope he had experienced in weeks. How long would the modification take? 2 hours, maybe 3. But I have to warn you, this is completely experimental. The quantum field might disrupt their shields, or it might just create pretty lights and then explode in our faces. Do it, Jake ordered. Tony, help him with the technical specifications. Amy, keep trying to contact other ships. Lisa, I need you to find us a position that gives us the best tactical advantage. Lisa Hayes studied her navigation charts. The nebula has some interesting properties, sir. Its gases contain heavy metals that interfere with most types of sensors. If we position ourselves at the edge, we might be able to hide our exact location while still having a clear shot at approaching ships. How close will the Vorthok have to get before they can see us clearly? Maybe 10,000 kilometers. That is point-blank range for their weapons, but it also means they will be close enough for a quantum scanner to be most effective. Jake nodded. It was a desperate plan, but it was better than sitting still and waiting to die. Make it happen. Paul, get that scanner modified. Everyone else, prepare for combat. The next 2 hours passed quickly. Throughout the ship, crew members worked to prepare for battle. The small armory was opened and weapons were distributed. Emergency bulkheads were sealed to contain damage from enemy fire. Medical stations were set up in protected areas. In engineering, Paul Wright and his team worked frantically to modify the quantum resonance scanner. The device was normally used to study black holes and neutron stars from a safe distance. Now they were trying to turn it into a weapon that could penetrate Vorthok defenses. The power requirements are enormous, Paul told his assistant, mechanic, second class Rick Stone. We will have to redirect energy from life support and artificial gravity to make this work. How long can we maintain the quantum field? Rick asked. Maybe 30 seconds at full power. After that, we will need at least 10 minutes to recharge the system. On the bridge, Amy Rodriguez continued her attempts to contact other human ships. Her efforts were mostly met with static, but occasionally she heard voices responding to her calls. "This is Captain Martinez of the transport ship Golden Gate," came one reply. "We are hiding in the asteroid belt near the fourth planet. We have 47 civilians on board and no weapons. This is Commander Park of the survey vessel New Horizon," came another. "Our engines are damaged, but our weapons are operational. We can provide support." By the time Paul Wright reported that the quantum scanner modification was complete, Amy had made contact with 7 other ships. Most were small civilian vessels with limited weapons, but all of their captains had volunteered to join the fight. "Lisa, what is the status of the Vorthok fleet?" Jake asked. 3 scout ships have broken off from the main group and are approaching our position. They will reach scanner range in 20 minutes. Jake looked around his bridge crew. In 20 minutes, they would find out if Paul Wright's crazy idea could work. They would discover if 43 humans and a few small ships could do what the greatest military fleets in the galaxy had failed to accomplish. "All stations, prepare for combat," Jake announced. "This is it, people. Let us show them what humans are made of." The first Vorthok scout ship appeared on the USS Defiance's main screen like a nightmare coming to life. It was enormous, at least 3 times the size of Jake's entire ship. Its hull was dark gray metal that seemed to eat light instead of reflecting. It blue energy glowed from weapon ports along its sides. Distance 50,000 kilometers and closing. Lisa Hayes reported from her navigation station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could see her hand shaking slightly as she worked the controls. Jake studied the alien vessel through the view screen. He had seen recordings of Vorthok ships before, but seeing one in person was different. It moved through space with confidence, like a predator that had never met anything it could not kill. "They are not charging weapons yet," Tony Clark observed from his weapons station. "They probably think this will be easy." Jake understood why the Vorthok were not taking precautions. Every battle in this war had followed the same pattern. Human ships would fire everything they had. Their weapons would bounce harmlessly off Vorthok shields. Then the aliens would destroy the humans with a single shot. The scout ship's crew probably saw this as routine cleanup work. "Paul, what is the status of our quantum scanner?" Jake asked. Paul Wright's voice came through the intercom from engineering. "Ready to fire, Captain. But I need to remind you that this is completely untested. The quantum field might disrupt their shields, or it might do nothing at all. Amy, are you jamming their communications?" Amy Rodriguez nodded from her communication station. "Yes, sir. They cannot call for help while my jamming is active, but the other 2 scout ships will notice if this one disappears." Jake looked at the tactical display. The 2nd and 3rd Vorthok scouts were hanging back, watching their companion approach the small human ship. They would intervene if something went wrong, but for now, they seemed content to let one ship handle the job. The first scout ship closed to 30,000 kilometers and finally began powering its weapons. Energy readings on the USS sensors climbed rapidly. "They are charging some kind of plasma weapon," Tony reported. "The power level is incredible. That is enough energy to destroy a small moon." Jake gripped the arms of his command chair. In a few minutes, they would all be dead, or they would accomplish something that no human force had managed in 6 months of war. There was no middle ground. 20,000 kilometers, Lisa announced. The Vorthok ship's weapons reached full charge. Jake could see the blue glow getting brighter on the main screen. The alien vessel was preparing to fire. "Paul, activate the quantum field on my command," Jake ordered. Focus it on their forward shields. Tony, prepare all photon torpedoes, but do not fire until I give the word. 15,000 kilometers, Lisa said. Jake watched the distance counter tick down. Everything depended on timing. If they fired the quantum scanner too early, might have time to adapt. If they waited too long, the enemy would destroy them before they could attack. 10,000 kilometers. They are targeting our engine section. Now, Jake shouted. Paul, fire the quantum scanner. In the engineering section, Paul Wright activated the modified quantum resonance scanner. The device had been designed to study the fundamental structure of space and time. Now it was being used as a weapon for the first time in human history. A beam of invisible energy lanced out from the USS Defiance toward the Vorthok scout ship. The quantum field moved faster than light, crossing the distance between the two vessels in an instant. Jake could not see the beam, but the ship's sensors showed it striking the enemy's forward shields. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Vorthok ship continued its approach, weapons still charged and ready to fire. Jake felt his heart sink. The mortification had failed. Then Amy Rodriguez shouted with excitement, "Their shield harmonics are fluctuating. The quantum field is disrupting their defensive systems." On the main screen, Jake could see the Vorthok ship's shields beginning to flicker. The blue energy field that surrounded the alien vessel was becoming unstable. Areas of the shield were disappearing for seconds at a time before reforming. "Tony, fire everything we have," Jake ordered. Now, while their shields are down, the USS Defiance erupted with weapons fire. Plasma cannons sent streams of superheated energy toward the enemy ship. Photon torpedoes streaked through space. Their guidance systems locked onto the Vorthok vessel's hull. The alien ship tried to maneuver away from the incoming attack, but it was too close and moving too fast to avoid the barrage. For the first time in the war, human weapons struck Vorthok armor without being stopped by shields. The plasma cannon fire hit the scout ship's hull and burned through the outer plating. Photon torpedoes exploded against the alien vessel's side, sending shockwaves through its structure. Secondary explosions began rippling along the enemy ship as its own power systems overloaded. "Direct hit," Tony yelled. "We have breached their hull in multiple sections." The crew of the USS Defiance cheered as they watched the mighty Vorthok ship stagger under their attack. Atmosphere vented from holes in the alien hull. Internal explosions sent flashes of light through the breach points. The enemy vessel was badly damaged and falling out of formation, but Jake's celebration was short-lived. The second Vorthok scout ship was already moving to attack them, and this one had seen what happened to its companion. It was not approaching directly like the first ship. Instead, it was staying at long range and charging its weapons. "They learned from our first attack," Lisa warned. "The second ship is keeping its distance and preparing to fire from maximum range." The damaged first scout ship was also recovering. Emergency power systems were coming online, and its shields were beginning to stabilize. Both enemy vessels opened fire simultaneously from opposite directions. Jake watched the incoming energy blasts on his tactical display and knew they had only seconds to live. The USS Defiance was about to be caught in a crossfire that would reduce them to atoms. Their small ship could not survive even one hit from Vorthok weapons. And now two damaged but still dangerous enemies were shooting at them. The bridge crew braced for impact. Amy Rodriguez closed her eyes. Tony Clark held onto his console. Lisa Hayes continued working at her station, trying to plot an escape course, even though she knew it was too late. Then Paul Wright's voice came over the intercom with words that changed everything. "Captain, I am reading massive quantum fluctuations throughout this entire region of space. That first scanner pulse did not just disrupt their shields, it created a cascading quantum resonance field that is spreading through subspace." "What does that mean?" Jake demanded, still watching the incoming enemy fire. "It means, sir, that every Vorthok ship in this star system just lost their primary defensive advantage." Jake felt the world shift around him as he understood what Paul was saying. The quantum resonance field was not just affecting the ship they had targeted. It was expanding outward through subspace at faster-than-light speeds, disrupting shield harmonics across the entire Vorthok fleet. The enemy fire that should have destroyed them struck the USS Defiance at reduced power. Their shields absorbed most of the damage, and the ship shook but survived. The Vorthok weapons were not firing at full strength because the alien ships were having their own problems. Amy, monitor their fleet communications, Jake ordered urgently. Yes, sir, and they are in chaos. I am picking up damage reports from at least 15 ships. Their commanders are demanding explanations for the shield failures. Jake looked at the tactical display showing the entire Vorthok fleet. Red warning lights were appearing next to ship after ship as the quantum resonance field spread through their formation. The aliens were losing the one advantage that had made them unstoppable. For 6 months, the Vorthok Empire had crushed every enemy they faced because their shields could stop any attack. Now, suddenly, they were vulnerable. And scattered throughout this star system were the survivors of destroyed human fleets. Waiting for a chance to fight back, Jake Morrison realized that 43 humans on a small exploration ship had just changed the course of the war. Jake Morrison stared at the tactical display as the reality of their situation hit him like a physical blow. The quantum resonance field was spreading outward from their position faster than light speed, moving through subspace and disrupting shield harmonics throughout the entire Vorthok fleet. Amy, what are you hearing from their communications? Jake asked urgently. Amy Rodriguez worked frantically at her station, her fingers dancing across the controls. Their fleet commanders are in complete panic, sir. I'm picking up damage reports from dozens of ships. They're reporting shield failures, power fluctuations, and system malfunctions across their entire formation. The USS Defiance shuddered as another reduced power blast from the Vorthok scouts grazed their hull. But the enemy weapons were firing at much lower strength than before. Without their overwhelming shield advantage, the alien ships were being much more careful. Paul, can we maintain this quantum effect? Jake asked. Paul Wright's voice came through the intercom from engineering. I'm working on it, Captain. If I can recalibrate the quantum scanner to pulse at specific intervals, we might be able to keep the resonance field active indefinitely. But it will drain our power reserves very quickly. Jake made a decision that went against every rule of space combat he had ever learned. Instead of trying to escape while the enemy was confused, he was going to attack the main fleet. Lisa, plot an intercept course for the center of the Vorthok formation. Jake ordered. Tony, prepare all remaining torpedoes and charge the plasma cannons. Amy, try to contact any human ships in this system. Lisa Hayes looked up from her navigation, stationed with surprise. Sir, you want us to fly toward the main fleet, the one with over 40 capital ships. That's exactly what I want, Jake replied firmly. They have spent this entire war believing they are invincible. Let's show them what humans do when we find a weakness in their armor. The USS Defiance turned away from the nebula and accelerated toward the heart of the Vorthok formation. As they flew, Paul Wright continued, sending quantum pulses that maintained the resonance field across an ever-widening area of space. Within minutes, reports began flowing in through Amy's communication system. A human destroyer that had been hiding behind an asteroid suddenly emerged and attacked 2 Vorthok frigates. Without their shields, the alien ships were destroyed in seconds. A damaged cruiser that had been presumed lost appeared from the outer system and devastated a Vorthok supply convoy. Captain, Amy said with growing excitement, I'm receiving messages from ships throughout the sector. The quantum field is spreading faster than the Vorthok can adapt to it. Human vessels that have been running and hiding for weeks are turning around and fighting back. Jake allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as he watched the tactical display. Red icons representing Vorthok ships were beginning to blink and fade as human forces struck back with sudden fury. But he knew this was just the beginning of a much larger battle. The transport ship Golden Gate, commanded by Captain Martinez, had 47 civilian passengers but also carried industrial mining charges for asteroid operations. Martinez used those charges as improvised weapons, ramming them into a Vorthok scout ship's hull and detonating them from inside the enemy vessel. Commander Park of the survey vessel New Horizon coordinated with 2 other exploration ships to attack a Vorthok cruiser from 3 directions simultaneously. Their combined firepower overwhelmed the alien ships, weakened defenses, and tore it apart all across the star system. The same scene was playing out. Human ships that had been hiding in fear were emerging to strike at their former tormentors. The Vorthok fleet, stripped of its primary advantage, was being torn apart by enemies they had dismissed as harmless. "Sir, the main Vorthok fleet is responding to our approach," Tony reported from his weapons station. 20 ships are breaking formation to intercept us." "Good," Jake said grimly. "The more ships they send, the more we can hit with quantum pulses. Paul, prepare for continuous bombardment. We're going to light up this entire region of space with quantum energy." As the USS Defiance dove toward the enemy formation, Jake watched the tactical display with fascination. The Vorthok ships were moving in patterns he had never seen before. Instead of the confident direct approaches they had used throughout the war, they were making evasive maneuvers and staying at long range. "They're afraid," Lisa observed with wonder. "Look at their formation. They're not attacking like an unstoppable force anymore. They're fighting like they think they might lose." Jake nodded. For 6 months, the Vorthok had crushed every enemy they faced with overwhelming superiority. They had never experienced doubt or fear in battle. Now, suddenly, they were vulnerable, and they did not know how to handle it. The first group of Vorthok interceptors opened fire at maximum range, their plasma lances streaking through space toward the small human ship. But their aim was poor, and their power levels were reduced due to the ongoing shield disruptions. The USS Defiance weaved between the incoming fire, taking only minor damage. "Return fire," Jake ordered. "Hit them with everything we have." Tony Clark launched their remaining photon torpedoes in a spread pattern, while the plasma cannons sent continuous streams of energy toward the enemy ships. The Vorthok vessels tried to evade, but without their shields they were much more vulnerable than before. One alien ship took direct hits from 3 torpedoes and exploded in a brilliant fireball. Another lost its main engine to plasma cannon fire and began spinning out of control. A third ship's hull was breached in multiple places, venting atmosphere and crew into space. Paul hit them with another quantum pulse. Jake called out. The modified quantum resonance scanner fired again, sending another wave of disruption through subspace. The effect struck the approaching Vorthok ships and caused their remaining shield generators to fail completely. "Their shields are down across the entire intercept force," Amy reported. "They're completely defenseless." Jake felt a fierce satisfaction as he watched the mighty Vorthok fleet struggle with a situation they had never faced before. But his joy was tempered by the knowledge that this was still just one battle in a much larger war. "Captain," Amy said, "suddenly, I'm receiving a priority transmission from Admiral Hayes. She's with a group of surviving fleet units near the Proxima system." Jake's heart leaped. Admiral Hayes had been his navigator, Lisa's commanding officer, before she joined the USS Defiance. If Hayes was alive and had ships with her, it meant the human fleet was not completely destroyed. "Put her through," Jake ordered. "Admiral," Hayes' voice came through the speakers with the sound of weapons fire in the background. "This is Admiral Hayes to all ships in the Kepler system. We are monitoring your quantum resonance field from here, and it's having the same effect on Vorthok forces throughout this entire region of space." Jake looked at his crew with amazement. The quantum field was not just affecting this one star system. It was spreading across multiple systems, disrupting Vorthok shields throughout a vast area of space. "Admiral, this is Captain Morrison of the USS Defiance," Jake replied. "We are the source of the quantum field. Can you coordinate with other fleet units to take advantage of the shield disruptions?" "Already happening, Captain. Human forces throughout the sector are reporting successful attacks on Vorthok positions. We're organizing a coordinated counteroffensive to push them back while their defenses are down." Jake looked around his bridge crew and saw the same expression on every face. They had done something that the greatest military minds in the galaxy thought was impossible. 43 people on a small exploration ship had found the key to defeating an enemy that had crushed galaxies. But as Jake watched more Vorthok ships moving to intercept them, he knew the real test was just beginning. They had proven that the enemy could be hurt. Now they had to prove that humanity could win. 6 months after the Battle of Kepler Nebula, Jake Morrison stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Centauri station and watched construction crews working on the newest ships of humanity's fleet. The USS Defiance, too, was nearly finished, her hull shining with new armor and her quantum resonance arrays clearly visible along her sides. The original USS Defiance sat in the station's main docking bay, now a museum ship that thousands of people visited every day. Children pressed their faces against the viewing windows to see the small exploration vessel that had changed the course of galactic history. Jake smiled as he remembered the day everything changed. After their first successful attack on the Vorthok scouts, the battle had continued for 18 hours. More human ships had joined the fight as word spread that the enemy could finally be hurt. By the end, they had destroyed over half of the Vorthok fleet in the Kepler system. The quantum resonance technology had spread quickly to every human colony and military base. Within weeks, human fleets equipped with the new weapons were pushing back Vorthok forces across dozens of star systems. The aliens who had seemed unstoppable were suddenly retreating on every front. Captain Morrison, a young ensign, approached. Nervously, Admiral Hayes would like to see you in the briefing room. Jake nodded and walked through corridors filled with busy activity. Centauri Station had become the headquarters for what people were calling the Great Counteroffensive. Ships from many different species docked here every day to receive quantum resonance equipment and coordinate attacks on Vorthok positions. Admiral Lisa Hayes was in the main briefing room, studying star charts with her senior officers. She had been promoted rapidly after the Battle of Kepler Nebula and now commanded the Third Fleet. When she saw Jake enter, she smiled and gestured for him to join them at the main table. "Jake, perfect timing," Lisa said. "We just received a message from the Vorthok homeworld. They want to negotiate peace terms." Jake raised an eyebrow in surprise. They want to negotiate. 6 months ago, they were crushing entire galaxies. It turns out their whole military system was based on having better shields than everyone else, Lisa explained, pointing to intelligence reports spread across the table. Once we showed them that advantage could be removed, their expansion stopped completely. They're facing rebellions in conquered territories, supply problems, and their own people are questioning whether endless war is a good idea. She showed him a galactic map that displayed the current military situation. Red areas that had once shown Vorthok control were much smaller now, while blue zones representing liberated territories covered large sections of multiple galaxy arms. "The really interesting thing is that they're not just talking to us," Lisa continued. 17 different alien species are demanding their independence. The Zephyrian Coalition has reformed their government. Even the crystalline entities are building new fleets to fight back. Jake studied the tactical information. "So what happens now?" "Now we finish what you and the USS Defiant started, but we do it carefully," Lisa said. "The quantum resonance technology has been shared with every human colony and allied species. No one will ever again face what we faced at Kepler Nebula." Through the observation windows, Jake could see ships from dozens of different civilizations docked at the station. Sleek Zephyrian fighters with their distinctive wing designs, massive crystalline entity vessels that looked like floating cities, and human ships of every size and type, all working together to prepare for the final campaign. "There's something else," Lisa said, handing him a data pad. "The Galactic Federation Council is recommending you for the Medal of Galactic Service. You would be the first human to receive it." Jake looked at the official document, then set it aside. "What about my crew?" "Paul Wright's engineering work made all of this possible. Amy Rodriguez coordinated the communications that brought scattered ships together. Tony Clark's weapons modifications have been copied by every fleet in known space. They're all being honored too," Lisa assured him. "But you were the captain who decided to stand and fight when everyone else was running away. You turned 43 people into the spark that started a galactic revolution." Jake walked to the window and looked out at the stars. In the distance, he could see the nebula where everything had started. It looked peaceful now, just a cloud of gas and dust lit by distant suns. It was hard to believe that humanity's greatest victory had begun in that quiet corner of space. "The new USS Defiance will need a captain for her first mission," Lisa said. "Are you interested?" Jake thought about his original crew. Paul Wright was now in charge of quantum resonance development for the entire human fleet. Amy Rodriguez had been promoted to admiral and was coordinating communications between allied species. Tony Clark was training weapons officers throughout the galaxy. Don Murphy, the young sensor technician, was now Lieutenant Commander Murphy and had his own ship. They had all earned their promotions through the skills they had shown during the battle, but Jake missed working with them as a team. The new USS Defiance would have a different crew, but she would carry the same spirit that had refused to surrender when everything seemed hopeless. "When do we launch?" Jake asked. Lisa smiled. "Weeks. Your mission will be to make contact with former Vorthok colonies that want to join the new Galactic Alliance. It's exploration work, just like your original assignment." Jake nodded. Exploration had always been his true calling. The war had been necessary, but he was happier thinking about discovering new worlds and meeting friendly alien species than planning military campaigns. Over the next 2 weeks, Jake watched the final preparations for the new ship. The USS Defiance, too, was larger than her predecessor, with better engines, stronger shields, and more advanced weapons. But she also had the same quantum resonance arrays that had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. On the day of launch, many of his original crew came to see them off. Paul Wright had installed several new improvements to the ship's systems. Amy Rodriguez provided them with the latest communication protocols. Tony Clark made sure their weapons were properly calibrated as the USS Defiance left Centauri Station and jumped to warp speed. Jake sat in his new captain's chair and thought about the journey that had brought them to this point. 6 months ago, he had commanded a small exploration ship trying to escape from an unstoppable enemy. Now he was captain of one of the most advanced vessels in the galaxy, heading out to help build peace between former enemies. The war was not completely over. There were still Vorthok forces that refused to surrender, and some alien species that wanted revenge instead of peace. But the days when one empire could crush entire galaxies were finished. The quantum resonance technology had been shared freely with anyone who wanted it, ensuring that no single force could ever again dominate the galaxy through superior shields. Jake looked at his new crew and saw the same determination that had carried them through the Battle of Kepler Nebula. These people were ready to explore strange new worlds, seek out new life and new civilizations, and boldly go where no one had gone before. The galaxy would remember the day that one human ship refused to fall. But Jake Morrison was already thinking about tomorrow, and all the tomorrows after that, when humanity and its allies would explore the stars not as refugees running from an unstoppable enemy, but as equals among the greatest civilizations in the universe. The age of Vorthok dominance was over. The age of cooperation and discovery had begun, and it all started with 43 humans who decided that giving up was not an option.